The night lay thick upon Blackwater Bay, a cloth of iron pricked with dull embers where the last fishing skiffs were late to their moorings. The black Betha slid between them with the hush of a thief. Sail furled, oars wrapped in wool, she scarcely made a ripple worth the starlight. Davos Seaworth stood at the prow, his gloved fingers tight on the cold rail. The wind came off the land with the faintest tang of smoke, old and low, as if the shore itself were breathing in its sleep. "Another cable's length," whispered Roland Storm beside him, the bastard of night song a broad shape in the dark. "Duskendale's lights are quenching." Davos's eyes had long since learned to read the coast. The paler smear that was shingle, the blacker void that marked a wharf, the narrow horn of the breakwater crouched like a dog at the harbor mouth. Beyond lay the town, stubborn as its bruised history, and the dun fort above, a square-set shadow. On most nights, there would be lanterns lining the quays, a bell now and again from a watchman dragging at time with iron tongue. Tonight, only a handful of fireflies nestled along the piers and two, no three, lamps bobbed on anchored cogs fat with grain. He thought of the holds below those decks, of the chaff-dusted bales and yawning sacks, and of the mouths they would not fill now. "Another cable's length," Davos said. The oars dipped, the Betha kissed the swell and breathed. He had ferried other contraband into Duskendale, spice, lace, cask black wine, back when he had been a nameless captain moving in the gray between law and theft. Once he had slipped a cask and a half of onions past 100 men starving on Storm's End's walls. A simple gift when all other roads were closed. Men had called him smuggler with contempt then, and king's man with respect now. Davos did not think the sea much cared either way. It was a broad thing, its memory longer than theirs and just as cold. A soft tap came from the midships. Devon, eager even for a whisper, leaned from the shadowed benches. "Father, hold," Davos breathed, though the boy had not spoken a single full word. Devon's teeth flashed once, white in the gloom, then vanished again. He would be a squire to a king and a knight to some other man's children, if he lived long enough. If Davos steered him through. A pale smudge to port resolved as another galley, the Myrish Maid, close enough for Davos to see men crouched like bundled ropes along her deck. Beyond her, the low, mean profile of Salador San's galleas, with her carved prow and fat belly and greed that moved as smoothly as oil on a calm sea. San had insisted on coming himself, the better to collect any stray coins that might be strolling along the docks without a hand to guide them. "Strolling coins don't have feet," Davos had said. "Most men's honor does," Salador had replied, and smiled like a knife. They drifted past the breakwater. The mouth of the harbor yawned. Davos gestured. The Betha's oars kissed the black water and came up slow, the skin of the bay curdling, flattening, parting. On the far pier a cresset guttered. A man huddled beneath it, cloak wrapped close, the fire's breath curling his beard copper. Another simmer of light farther in marked the harbor tower. No chain here, not as in King's Landing. Duskendale's caution had other shapes. "Once we are in, no horn," Davos said. "If the watch stirs, you drop where you stand and let them pass over you. Breath slow. Keep knives close. And if they step on us?" Someone murmured from the gloom. "Pray to whatever god hears fools first," Davos answered, "and stab his foot." A ripple of quiet laughter died at Roland's glance. "We take the pier," the bastard said, low and precise, the words well worn from repeating. "We take the tower. We fire the cogs. We are gone before the town remembers it has hands." "And if it remembers it has bows?" said Allard Seaworth, stifled impatience in him. He was a bold boy, all salt and spark. Davos loved him and feared him with equal measure. "Then we move faster than their strings," Roland said. They touched the pier with the gentlest kiss. Grapnels flicked and bit. Men flowed to the wharf in a dark spill, boots making that particular wood-on-wood moan that Davos had always hated for how it told on them if anyone had ears. But the harbor was dead and cold and no voices rose. Davos followed Roland, light on his feet for a man past his first youth, as if the planks were ice. A gull rattled its dry cry and lifted into the night. The city smelled of smoke and old fish and the thin leavings of poorer men. Somewhere beyond the docks, a woman laughed once and then made the sound again, hollowly, as though returning it to herself. The tower had a door that pretended to be stout, confessed with the first push. 2 men drowsed by an oven still warm. Roland went past them like a draft. Davos did not draw his sword. He did not like to kill men who had not yet stood up. It had not stopped him more times than he wished to count, and it did not stop him now. They lit the tower from within it, that oldest trick. Flame crawled up green timber and took a slow breath and then another. The wind sniffed and grew curious. Men ran to the keys in confusion. Half-dressed men with cudgels, with knives they had forgotten were dull. A horn did sound then, thin and lonely, but all the other horns had been muffled in their keeper's sleep. To the west, Salador's ship lurched into motion, oars flashing once. Devon and Allard broke oil jars along the deck of the nearest grain cog. Roland swung on a rope like a boy across to her side, struck flint in his cupped hands, and set spark to the thin slick writhing like a headless snake along planks. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the line of oil imagined itself a wick and the ship bloomed. Light rolled across the water. Men shouted, ran. Davos smelled wheat and tar and thought of bread he would not eat. He could not help imagining the other side. In King's Landing the granaries were already shrinking to bone. He had seen the city from the sea 100 times. He knew how many ovens in what alleys could set their own smoke to rise on a morning. How many bellies could be fed from 3 cogs laden and safe. 3 cogs less was a cut of meat that could not be grown back. He steadied his hands on the rope so they would not shake with the thought. Salador San came gliding in like a man who had always been meant to arrive at that exact moment, showing his white teeth. He had his sailors throwing long-hooked irons, snagging bales and crates as men on the quays wept and cursed. He seized flour because it could be sold elsewhere, and he seized a brocaded chair because he was Salador San and disliked the idea of leaving anything that gleamed. Roland's men leapt back to the Betha. Flames wove themselves from ship to ship, the harbor's surface dressing itself in ripples and petals of fire. Above them the Dun fort's face stayed stupid, blind, unmoved. A horn finally found its mate. Shouts rang, hoofs drummed. Davos could imagine the lord's men stumbling to their barracks, the captain shouting for some idiot to go wake his lord, the idiot tripping on a threshold in the dark. Back, Davos said. Back, and quiet now. Sing to the oars in your heads, not your throats. They slid into the bay with the harbor's glow on their backs and the cold belly of the night swallowing them again. Davos took one long look over his shoulder. The fires looked smaller already. The sea took their light in her hands and kneaded it to muddy froth. Roland wiped sweat and ash from his brow with the heel of his hand. 3 cogs, he said. We should have taken 5. We were meant to be gone before the town remembered it had hands, Davos said softly. You heard yourself. Stannis would have had 5, Roland said, but without heat, the way a man speaks of a thing he admires and cannot do. Stannis would have had 5 and burned the docks down to the pilings, Salador purred, slewing his galleas alongside long enough to say it, his voice floating over water like a perfume. And every house behind them, and the people in them. But this is why Davos is my friend, and one day I will die poor. You will die rich if you keep your tongue, Davos said. San's laughter came like bells and was gone. He thought of the Queen's men who had begged for fires on Dragonstone's beaches, of their eyes when the Red Priestess spoke, of the way men found meaning in fire as easily as in a coin or a sword or a daughter's hand. He had watched Melisandre stare into flames as if they were a window that opened onto air rather than smoke. If there were visions there, they did not haggle. Davos envied them nothing. Behind them, Duskendale came fully awake, horns like angry bees in a jar. The Myrish maid and the galleas swung wide, oars licking and vanishing like tongues in the dark. The Black Betha settled into the old rhythm that was music written in marrow. Davos let his hands loosen on the rail and breathed what the night allowed him. Before dawn, they were across the mouth of the bay and slipping beneath the lee of the black rocks below Dragonstone. The castle lifted above them in the faint, pre-sun ash of morning, a thing carved from the bones of old gods, every gargoyle a frozen snarl. High windows still wore the red priestess's sleep. Davos had always hated the castle's outlines. They seemed to him like someone's dream of power, too blunt to be beautiful, too intent to be truly strong. They climbed to the yard and gave their account. Axel Florent listened with the impatience of a man who is never the subject of the story. 3 cogs. 3 large cogs, Roland said mildly. Wheat. Wheat, Axel repeated as if the word itself had wronged him. The fat of the reach headed up the bay like calves to a butcher. You should have taken 5. Or the whole harbor. The small folk will talk. They will say when Stannis comes, he takes their bread. If they tell the truth, they will say when Stannis comes, the Lannisters cannot feed them, Davos said. He had never learned how to hold his tongue when honor was to be argued. It made him a poor lord and perhaps a worse courtier, but it would make him a better ghost when he had to answer for all this. Axel opened his mouth and let shut it again, surprised into silence, like a gate slammed by wind. It was a talent Davos had, to stop men with their own breath. Bring me to the king, Davos said. Stannis waited in the painted chamber, and the long table they called the painted table was a sea in itself under his hands. Every bay and river was rendered in oils, the mountains raised to touch beneath a palm. It was older than Stannis, and older than Robert, and older than Ares, older than the 7-pointed star on Axel's chest or the ruby roughening Melisandre's throat. The smoke of above tapers made the colors move. 3 cogs, Stannis said when Davos finished. He did not sit. Stannis could be as motionless as a rock until he was not. You did well. Davos did not expect praise, and the simplicity of it struck him with unexpected warmth. My king, Lannister mouths are many, Stannis said. Fewer than there were yesterday, fewer still tomorrow. Lord Valor writes from Rosby that their lord sickens. He has no sons. He may have a nephew if the gods hate me. Men without heirs think about legacy and law. Rosby will bend. Rosby's grain stores are famous, Axel Florent put in, now that there was glory to wedge his tongue upon. The town may be coaxed to forget the lion. They will remember hunger, Stannis said. It will teach them. Melisandre stood half in shadow, half in a wash of the tower's red light, as if content to be of both. Her eyes, when they found Davos, were cool. She looked at him the way a woman looks at a stone whose shape she had already memorized. The night is long, she said. Bread does not reach across it. Only fire. Bread keeps men from selling themselves for a fire, Davos said. My lady, her lips curved. It might have been a smile. If they sell themselves for fire, was the bread not already sold? Enough, Stannis said, and she stepped back as if drawn by a cord he held. Lord Seaworth, you will take 20 boats into the gullet and seize what ships you can from the bay's mouth. Lord Celtigar has men watching at Claw Isle. Lord Valerion swears Driftmark's strength to this, and I will hold him to it. Stannis's hand moved one carved ship from Dragonstone's painted quay to a narrow throat where the waters bunched and were forced to speak the language of rocks. All that moves into King's Landing will pass beneath your stare. If it feeds the city, do not let it pass. There will be more horns like Duskendale's, Davos said. Men fight hard for their bread. Most of us. Fight harder, Stannis said simply. And on land? Axel asked. My king, if we took Stokeworth. You cannot hold Stokeworth with men you have not, Stannis said. We have Storm's End now, and that cheapens our numbers. The Storm Lords came for Robert. They stayed for Renly's green cloak. They come to me because there is nowhere left where their oath looks like a feast. But they are still Storm Lords, not magicians. We do what can be done. We hold Duskendale by fear, Rosby by law. We will force the Roseroad closed. The Roseroad, Axel said, tasting the word as if to make sure it belonged in his mouth. The Tyrells will not like that. Let Mace Tyrell come up the road and argue it, Stannis said. If he finds no bread to carry, the road will feel longer. Davos saw it then, laid on the table like a story told in paint. The Roseroad winding from Bitterbridge to the city's walls, the cart trains of the Reach all harnessed to it. The Searoad sweeping along the coast from Lannister to Highgarden, linking fat towns where men counted coin and bread as if both were compliments paid to their wisdom. To cut one was to harry the lion's belly. To cut both was to expose the lion's ribs. "You will not assault the city," Melisandre said, not asking. "Not yet," Stannis said. "Let them starve. Let them turn on the boy. The small folk have this gift. They know how to hate the hand that cannot feed them." "A gift," Davos said. He did not mean to, but the word fell out soft and bitter. Stannis looked at him with that worn coin of a stare he used when men said things he did not like, and did not slay them at once for saying them. "You think there is another way," he said, not unkindly. "I think of the baker's child in King's Landing," Davos said. "Of the way his ribs will show. Of how he will hate whomever you point to, my king. Today a boy, tomorrow a woman. The day after, no one at all, only hunger. You bring me a harder thing than taking cogs," Stannis said. "You always have. I would make the realm lawful. The realm must be fed for the law to matter. The Lannisters broke both when they slew Lord Eddard. They would starve the law if I permitted it. So I will starve them." Melisandre's eyes shone. "The flames show banners strangled by thorns. They show roses drowning in blood, and a lion that coughs black smoke. But they show another thing as well if one looks. A stag standing over all. Do they show who makes the bread?" Davos asked before he could stop himself. "Enough," Stannis said again, with a weariness that stabbed Davos more surely than rebuke. Later, when the council dispersed in the grudging clockwork manner of men who half hoped to be called back for more, Melisandre crossed the floor to Davos as if they had an understanding that he did not recall making. "You love these small people," she said. "It is a thing of your heart that it beats for them." "I was one," Davos said. She studied his face as if reading a book with no pictures. "Once there was a boy in Ashai," she said, no tremor in her voice. "He begged by a river of tar. He learned the small ways men protect themselves from hunger. The curl of a back against a wall, the cup of two hands, the way you turn your wrist so a man thinks you mean to thank him when you mean to flee. He learned the bigger ways too. Of all of them, only one saved him." "Fire," Davos said. "Faith," she corrected. "But fire is how faith dresses itself when it must be seen." She offered him a hand then, palm open, as if showing him he could put what he liked there. A coin, a seed, a lie. Davos did not touch it. She let it fall at once, as though it had always been meant to drop. "Your king will win because he is chosen," she said. "The city will starve because it is guilty. Men will die because they must. You do not need to look into any flames to read those truths." "I hope you are wrong in one place at least," Davos said. He left her because he did not know the name of the thing that would force him to stay. King's Landing woke to a rumor of smoke. Tyrion Lannister smelled it in his dreams and woke with his tongue a stranger in his mouth and his head marshaled into ragged ranks that refused to march in a straight line. He drank water and then wine and then, regretting that, water again. Shay said something amused and wicked and made a shape with her body that would ordinarily move him, but he had too many shapes of smoke in his head. He kissed her once and swung his short legs to the floor, thinking of chains. Chains were what he liked best this week. Chains were heavy and honest and would do exactly what you made them do provided you built them correctly and kept the links out of the pyromancer's baskets. He put on a doublet that didn't make his neck look like a purple sausage and went to the Tower of the Hand to read the city's latest woes. Bywater met him there, all severe lines and iron mouth, and Varys joined with a rustle like paper remembering that it had once been a tree. Cersei arrived afterward, late enough to wound and shining enough to declare herself immune to the powder of it. "Duskendale is burned," Bywater reported without any of the respectful edges a lesser man would have tried to stitch around such words. 3 ships and stores. The harbor tower was set alight, but the Dun fort holds. They've sent to Rosby for aid. Rosby's lord is ill. Rosby's lord was ill yesterday, Tyrion said. He will be ill tomorrow. We all will, unless someone finds a baker with a sense of humor. He glanced at Varys. What does your whispering wind tell you about our bold smuggler? The wind is full of onion, Varys said mournfully, and of King Stannis' stern breath. Davos Seaworth led the raid, with the bastard of Nightsong beside him, and that most unscrupulous of Lyseni pirates drifting after them like a cat after a cream cart. They have a list, these men. It reads, "Starve the lion." Cersei's mouth flattened. "We have the Roseroad." "You have the Roseroad if men can go down it," Tyrion said. "If they do not, you have a line in the dust and men starving on the wrong side of it, which is what men with lines in the dust are often given." "You have your wildfire," she said, glad now to say the word as she would a prayer. "You promised fires to keep the sea." "I promised a surprise," Tyrion said, with a smile he did not feel. "I did not promise that surprise would also bake loaves. The pyromancers bring me jars and jars." Haelene is eerily content these days, like a man who has discovered that his mirror has been telling him the truth all his life. "We will build your fires. We will light the sea. We will do it even if the sea refuses to act appreciative." "Men in the streets are already muttering," Bywater said. "Bread is dear." The sellers boast of being near out before noon and then somehow find more by evening at twice the price. "If the Rosby wagons do not come, there will be trouble. If they do not come twice, there will be blood. Where would we be without you to paint the cheerful picture, Jacelyn?" Tyrion said. He rubbed his eyes. Sleep was a wine more precious than arbor gold these days, and as thin as the stuff Cersei had served him at supper. "Send a strong escort along the Roseroad." "Ser Balon's one." "No, that will make a demonstration." Ser Lancel is bold as a boy and convinced that wearing King Robert's old clothes has given him King Robert's old strength. Give him 100 horse and orders to buy everything with the crown's coin before someone else takes it with knives. Cersei's eyes sharpened. "You will not spend the crown's coin without consulting me." "The crown's coin?" Tyrion asked softly. "All of it? All the copper scraped from gutters? Because I have seen the gutters, sweet sister, and they do not look as if they have been well milked." She looked as if she would claw his face if it would not ruin her nails. "Do it and see if father gives you back your purse when he hears." "When he hears, he will not have to feed a city with a purse," Tyrion said. "I will not let Stannis starve us. He may try. He may do quite well at it. But I will not sit like a fat man at a table groaning with food and wait for someone to pull it out from under me so that I can slam my fists and cry." "Your metaphors are starving as well," Cersei said, and swept from the room. He could feel her anger swirl behind her like the skirts of a courtesan. Varys fluttered a hand to his breast as if moved by invisible music. "The Tyrells," he said, "have begun their slow waltz from Bitterbridge. Lord Mace likes to move with ceremony. Ser Loras prefers to move like a knife." "The Tyrells have bread," Tyrion said, half to himself, "and they have reason to share it with us. Once they have kissed our ring. Or once we have kissed theirs," Varys murmured. "Peter will put us in the proper pose." Littlefinger had vanished west to stir roses with whispers. Tyrion did not trust him and envied him in equal measure. "If they come up the Roseroad, Stannis will cut them," Bywater said flatly. "My men report movement near Stokeworth, near Rosby. Some of the Crownland houses may look twice at what colors they think they owe to wear. The king should be seen in the streets. The king should be stowed in a cupboard until he learns to keep his tongue," Tyrion said. "Failing that, yes, we will show the boy while there is bread to throw to children." He went later to the Alchemist's Guildhall to measure green fire with his eyes and feel dread in the pit of his belly. A cold, awkward thing that would not speak even to him. Haelene the pyromancer walked him through rows of jars like the candles in some fool's chapel. "More each day, my lord," Haelene said with that ghastly cheer. "It is as though the air has become dry kindling and our art so much flint." "Make enough to fill the river," Tyrion told him, and stopped himself from adding, "and enough to frighten my hound." The hound stood at his shoulder, massive and ill at ease, the scar on his face a map of a future no one wants to read. Fire made him more than uneasy. It unmade him, Tyrion had watched him the night they had tested the first throne jars. The set of Sandor Clegane's mouth had hardened as if to save what dignity it could as the water burned. "Don't you damn throw that shit near me," the hound growled now, for no cause but his own thoughts. "Not near the king. Not near the horses. Not if you want any of them sane." "I rarely want people sane," Tyrion said. "Sane people have a nasty habit of noticing how much I cost them." Outside the Guildhall, a boy darted toward them. He might have been 10. He might have been 40, given how hard the city had pulled at him. "Bread," he said, and flinched in case the word itself would be beat. "Bread, my lords." "I am not your lord and I am not your baker," Tyrion said, and then called back to a passing seller. "Your cheapest loaf, and if you cheat me, I will deduct it from your rent." The man gaped, too stunned by his luck to be offended by the threat. He thrust a loaf into the boy's hand and fled before either could reconsider. The boy stared at the bread as if it had been promised to someone else and then looked up. "Go on," Tyrion told him, softer than he had intended. "Eat, if only to annoy them." The boy went with a suspicious look at his luck, clutching the loaf to his chest as though someone might try to steal it back. Tyrion watched him vanish into the narrow throat of a lane and told himself that if he were a better man he would not care. He cared more each day. It made him worse at the things he had to do. A king's hand should not cry over bread. He took the boy's unease with him to the river and watched men laying heavy links across the banks where the Blackwater pinched itself narrow. The links lay like sleeping beasts. 100 oars reach out. The current stroked and whispered. The chain towers were rising, the masons singing to the stones to make them obey. The river felt that song and did not care at all. When news came from Rosby that Lord Giles muttered to his maester and did not get up from the bed, Tyrion sent 3 letters, 2 promises, and a bag of coin to the town with instructions to spend it all on grain. Bywater sent 50 men in plain cloaks ahead of Lancel's showy 100 to make sure the coin did not get lost walking from one purse to another. Men had a way of losing coin that had been long in someone else's purse. Rosby was quiet in the way towns are when they think something is happening that the gods won't like and they intend to watch it from behind a door. Stannis's men watched as well. A day out from the city, Lancel's 100 ran into them on a low, scrubby hill where the wind had room to run. The Lannister horse went up with banners, proud as always. The Stormlander horse did not lift any flags and moved as if the ground belonged to them. Lancel sent a boy to parley and men to form on the crest and shouted as if sound itself could dress him in valor. Davos watched from a ridge with a glass that made the world small. "They are children," he said. Allard at his elbow laughed and stopped when Davos looked at him. "You were a child too last year in my mind," Davos said. "I am not as young as I was then." Roland Storm stood to the other side. His eyes narrowed against the light. "Clegane, not the hound," he said, half to himself, marking a dark rider among the Lannister left. "A lesser one. The Mountain's brothers less than." "Not half so bad," Allard said, trying to find something to balance his fear. "Half is plenty," Roland said, the corner of his mouth twitching. When Lancel's line dipped to charge and then stalled, when the Stormlander horse melted backward and then gathered into the hollow of the hill as if drawn there by old habit, Roland gave the word. The light horse he had hidden in the sparse cover of thorn and saplings slid down and around and seized the wagon's Lancel, had held a mile behind with the complacency of a man who thinks he has only one enemy. The teamsters fought like men who had never expected to fight at all. The first cask broke with a fat sound under a mallet. Flour powdered the air like a snow that refused to settle. Davos tasted his own tongue. Men who had brought that bread to this place watched their day blow away like breath in winter. Lancel panicked. Panic is as honest as chains. His men broke. Roland did not follow them. He burned what they could not carry and led his men away. He had learned something of that from Stannis. Tyrion received the news with a face like a ledger that did not balance and flung his wine cup at the wall, so that a servant would have something to clean in the hope it might seem activity. Cersei smiled with precise malice and said something about boy heroes. Varys fluttered his hands and suggested a prayer to the mother, which earned him twin looks of hate from brother and sister. bread riots came 3 days later. The early sellers were crowded until they were carried off their feet and wares, and then the late sellers got their prices, and the men who had paid early prices got knives. The king had been paraded through the streets that morning with Ser Marin behind him and 200 gold cloaks ahead. He had smiled his new smile and tossed copper to those quick enough to push past other hands. The sight of coppers falling onto a woman's head as she lifted her arms to take them, and the sound that came out of her when she realized the coin had split her scalp were gifts the city gave itself. It remembered them when the cries started. Sansa Stark walked with the queen that day. She had learned how to be quiet in the way of girls in cages, and was very good at making her face a place where no one could read their reflection. The city pressed in because cities are built to press. Streets only widened to make room for parades and trouble, and sometimes those two were one. The crowd flowed like a river of men who had discovered that they were made of water. A thrown clod of dung struck Joffrey's shoulder and left a smear on his cloak. The boy king's eyes rounded. His mouth made a shape, and he ordered something foul with too much delight. The crowd had already moved beyond him to a place where orders did not exist. They saw a baker's cart and a woman on it and lifted both like a raft. The gold cloaks lowered their lances and then lost them in the press, and then the press was on them. Sansa felt hands on her arm, on her hair. She had learned to find the good, quiet place inside her head where songs lived. But the songs were pushed aside by a wet-throated roar and a breath that stank of empty stomachs. Then Sandor Clegane's sword came down, and the hand in her hair lost its grip because it had lost its fingers. He pulled her against him. The smell of leather and some memory of horse and iron and fear all that she could know. "Little bird," he said, not kindly, not cruelly. "Do you want to live?" He carried her, like she weighed nothing through the writhing knot of bodies. Men fled at the sight of him, and men reached to pull him down, and men fell. He put her behind a gate and stripped the crest from a shield and went back into the boil. When he returned, there was blood on his sword, and his eyes had that particular narrowness that said the fire in his head was starting to wake. She should have thanked him 100 times. She could not find the words. "Thank you," she said once, and that was all. And he laughed with no humor in it and said, "Sing for me, little bird, that's what you're for," and left. When the riots had burned themselves down into ash and the bodies had been carted to somewhere the carts would not be seen and the streets swept until even the blood seemed ashamed, the city went quiet again, which is the most dangerous sound a city that is hungry can make. On Dragonstone, the Queen's men burned a man named Gunser Sunglass because he refused to trade his gods for red ones. The fire took him open-eyed and still praying, and men who had sworn oaths in older halls shifted on their feet and glanced at one another and pretended not to see the way smoke clung to the inside of their mouths long after the wind had taken it from their faces. Davos stood at the back and did not bow his head. When it was done, he went to Stannis. "My king," he said, "it is a hard thing to forget a smell. Men will smell this in their beds." "There are two kinds of men," Stannis said wearily. "Those who keep their oaths and those who keep their secrets. I am tired of both." Sunglass could have permitted one ceremony, one touch of flame. He refused. He was a lord and had his stubbornness as his privilege. He paid for it with his life. So do men who steal bread in King's Landing, and no one writes their names. "I would write them," Davos said. "Yes," Stannis said, with something like sadness in it. "You would, and you would burn the ink after." He sent men to Stokeworth and Rosby with promises of pardon and the weight of law. Rosby thought a while and then thought again. The town elders counted coins and looked over their shoulders to see who was watching. Stokeworth shut its gates and shouted defiance, and then did not shout anything when Stormlander Rangers took the wheat from the fields at night and left the stubble neatly combed. A message came from Mace Tyrell to Cersei, heavy with courtesies and bread, not unlike the man himself. Littlefinger delivered it with a smile like a handkerchief pressed to the lips of a corpse at a fashionable funeral. "We march post-haste," Lord Mace promised in phrases that took their time. "Ser Loras burns for battle. Lord Tarly counsels prudence but will obey his liege as is proper. The Red Wine fleet must mind its own shores for the present, as the sea has grown troublesome. Yet we shall bring all succor due to a queen and crush the pretensions of a rebel king." "Troublesome," Tyrion said when Littlefinger had gone. "That means Stannis has more ships in the throat of the world than is comfortable. It means the Arbor would rather keep its wine than spill its blood. It means Paxter Redwine's daughter likes the look of the Shield Islands and would prefer they not be dressed in iron, which they will be if he takes his sails elsewhere. It means, in sum, that we are alone with a promise, which is my least favorite company. They will come," Varys breathed. "They will bring their rose, and we shall pin it to our lion and pretend the two have always known which way to face. And in the meantime," Tyrion said, "we will cut our bread into smaller pieces so more men can pretend they have had their share." He sent to the city's bakers orders to dilute flour with oats, with peas, with anything that would not kill a man less quickly than hunger. He set prices and had Bywater enforce them. Prices are like snakes. They find cracks. Tyrion found himself walking the walls at dusk like a father whose children are not yet home, keeping watch for a thing that could not be seen from walls: the absence of ships. He listened to the river's mouth as though it might speak his name and then Stannis's. The chain grew, the jars of wildfire stacked. Men sharpened swords with the care of priests. The Searoad turned into something like a myth as Stannis's riders learned it with their feet. Along the coast, fat towns that had sent grain and cheese and salted fish up the bay watched the galleys of House Valerion glide past, tails of foam behind them like signatures. Some villages made bonfires on the strand and waved as if blessing. Others doused their lamps and hid their bread under their floorboards and learned to walk softer. Salador San seized a cog carrying cherries and carpets and a girl with eyes the color of the inside of an oyster shell and declared it a fair night's work. "Cherries," Davos said with bleak humor when Salador showed him the ship as if she had been a lover. "We will pelt the city with them, and its piety will be satisfied. We will sell them to the lady who wants to eat cherries," San said. "You see, my friend, you and I are both generous men. We only disagree on the subject." Mace Tyrell's slow tide rolled north toward Bitterbridge and then brought itself to a halt. He was lord of one of the greenest places in the realm and a stranger to hunger. He had to reacquaint himself with the sound it made in other men. Randall Tarley wanted to move. Loras wanted to burn. Old Lord Rowan counseled reason in a voice as smooth as milk. Olenna, no one called her that to her face, suggested withered sarcasm by the spoonful where it would sting least and stick longest. Peter Baelish smiled and taught men to hear what they already meant to do and think it had been their idea. "King's Landing starves," he said, like a man sharing a recipe. "You must not let it be known that you brought the famine with you when you came to feed it. Stannis closes the roads. He closes the bay. Iwa. I'd like very much for you to arrive with a righteous army and your wagons light insofar as their contents have been spilled and spoiled. Do not give him the pleasure of being right." "Are you saying we do nothing?" Loras demanded, all heat. His grief for his king was a slash across his pride. He wore both badly. "We ride while bread rots on wagons. We wait while mothers sell themselves for crusts. I am saying," Littlefinger said reasonably, "that if you can ride without feeding the enemy, you should. If you cannot, then you must consider how you intend to feed him. Stannis is starving the lion. He will starve the rose if he can. You must starve him more." "Starve him?" Mace blinked. "And how, pray? Do you starve a man who does not eat?" "You starve what he imagines he can eat tomorrow," Littlefinger said. "You starve his hopes." The Reach men began to scout in earnest. Tarley sent lean riders with leaner horses who ate grass and did not complain about it. They stole at night and set fires in careful places. Stannis's men answered with fires of their own. The Roseroad filled with ghosts of wagons that had turned back and men who swore they had seen figures moving in the hedges like thorns come alive. The Lannister coin sent out with Lancel came back in handfuls and with blood on it. Some of the grain reached the city. More did not. Those wagons that did arrive came with wheels that sounded as if the wood had learned to weep. Inside the walls, Sansa watched the queen grow sharper, like a blade polished on her own fear. She sipped watered wine with other women who talked to her as if she were a doll that had once been a girl. She learned the faces of desperation. The laundress with raw hands who would not meet her eye because she wanted to ask for coin and would not. the embroidress whose child coughed at night in a way that told Sansa he would not stop, the Septa who had lost her god's voice and pretended she had not. Some nights Sansa went to the sept alone and prayed to the mother and the maiden because of habit and to the old gods because of something like stubbornness, though she knew only that they were meant to live in leaves and water and she had neither. She did not ask for rescue anymore. She asked for bread to taste like anything other than sadness. On a night when the moon was a pale rind and the wind had something cold to say about autumn arriving early, Varys came to Tyrion with a look that was almost excitement and almost terror. "A ship," he said. 2, 3. From the Mander. The red wine sails. Not the whole fleet, no, but a taste. Tyrion went to the river and leaned over the parapet with him. The Blackwater came black and sure. Farther out, beyond the chain, the bay lay as smooth as a blame. In the east, the gullet choked itself narrow and the lights of Dragonstone made a pricked crown on absolutely nothing. "Davos will be there," Tyrion said. "He will count them. Can he count if we do not let him see?" Varys asked gently, and that was how Tyrion found himself standing over Helene's jars and sending for a dozen small craft with shallow draft and men with light hands and no courage for dying. They slid along the south bank by night, the jars wrapped in cloth, the wicks coiled like sleeping snakes. If a red wine galley took them for fishermen and wanted to take their fish, well then, the fish would burn their hands. It was a fool's plan and it worked like a small, foolish thing. Well enough to harm someone, not well enough to matter. 2 red wine ships flared like torches in the narrow. One drifted long enough to set a third afire. Men screamed as men always scream in burning water. On Dragonstone, the flames were seen. Montfort Valerion put out with 6 galleys and Davos with 4 more and Salador San with laughter on his lips and a desire to chastise men for playing at other men's games. By dawn the bay was dotted with charred planks and 3 dying men coughing tar. The red wine sails turned back to the Mander. Tyrion stood on the river's edge and felt brief shame and brief relief, and then both were gone, carried off by the same indifferent current. "Chains," he said, because he always came back to them. "Finish them." The Rosby Lord died, coughing, whispering. He left a will that named a cousin and a nephew and a squire and a bastard and 3 saints for good measure. Stannis sent a lawyer with a dry face and a long memory of what had been done in the reigns of this king and that one, and the Rosby men found themselves more convinced by parchment than by coin. They sent word that they would keep their stores for the lawful king. Tyrion sent Bywater to convince them otherwise. Bywater returned with a woman's shawl and a hostage who had not wanted to be a hostage and a list of names who would never sell bread to a Lannister again. Davos rode into Rosby's market square with Roland at his side and 100 men behind them and treated for bread. He named prices that were not insulting and punishments that were not either. "Sell at fair price," he said. "Keep enough for your own bellies. Know that men with lion cloaks will offer you more coin tomorrow if you hold your grain back. Know also that there is no coin in a grave." "He thinks himself merciful," muttered a man in the crowd, not quietly enough. Davos heard and did not answer. He knew what he thought himself and disliked all of it. He slept that night in a house whose owner had gone to Stokeworth with a cart of flour and would not return. He washed his hands in a basin and watched the flour cloud the water like a ghost too tired to haunt. He dreamed of the day he had crept into Storm's End with onions in his hold and knees like water in his legs, and Robert's men had come down to him with voices hoarse with hunger. He dreamed of a boy with eyes too big and hands too thin and a smile that had been more terrifying than any shadow. He woke with tears hot on his face and no one to see them. Stannis came to the Crownlands at last with an army that looked smaller than a king should have and harder than a king deserves. He arrayed them in measured strokes along the roads that fed the city and instructed them to ruin what they could not steal. "Do not despoil fields that do not feed Lannister," he told them. They tried. Men try. Melisandre walked among the campfires, leaving whispers. She slept when she pleased, if sleep was what her stillness meant. Celis prayed with her face set as if it were tired of holding its own bones up. Shireen watched everything with the careful intent of a child who has been told she is ugly and has decided that the ugliness is everyone else's for saying it aloud. She liked Davos and fed his gulled fatherhood with talk of ships carved on the table's edges and the names of old kings whose crowns had rusted into the sea. He could not long bear to be near or far from her. From the south, Tyrell banners crept and were stayed. Tarly beat Stannis' scouts at a ford and was beaten in turn when Roland feigned flight. Loras tried to force a bridge of wagons over a stream cluttered with rocks and found the rocks willing to argue. Men died in skirmishes that named no towns and no heroes. The war had begun to do what wars always do after a while. It had learned to speak in small voices. The city thinned. Bread was cake in dreams. Tyrion ordered the last of the royal grain stores distributed to the septs to share out and paid for it with curses and the knowledge that half the grain would go in the night to men who knew how to make storehouses walk. Cersei grew sour as morning milk left too long in a room where no windows opened. She watched Sansa with the interest of a woman who has found a small thing she might break to see how it worked. She sat with Tommen in her lap and stroked his hair as though she were petting a dog she loved and planned to drown if it bit. The day finally came when Varys said quietly, "The gold cloaks will not hold every gate." "Which gate?" Tyrion asked. "The one hunger knocks on," Varys said, which was no answer and every answer. "It was the river gate. It is often the river." Stannis' men came at dawn under a white rag somebody said was a flag and somebody else said was a sheet stolen from a laundress in the night. The gold cloaks made a show. The small folk made a surge. A barrel rolled and burst and there was grain in the mud, and then the mud was men, and then a captain had his throat cut by a woman who had forgotten she had a knife in her hand, and then the gates were open not because anyone had ordered it but because the world sometimes does what it intended and men pretend they chose it. Davos walked through the river gate with a sword in his hand and held it wrong on purpose. He did not want to look like a conqueror. He wanted to look like a man who had come to calm a room where a child had been crying too long. It did not help. People see what they need to. He shouted orders to hold back his men. He shouted orders to hold back other men's fear. He has never had a loud voice. It did not matter. The sound of the gates was louder. Bywater tried to rally, and a Kettleblack was somewhere in the press with his eyes looking only at coin. Tyrion stood on a cart so he could see. The hound came, sword drawn, his breath labored, a speck of soot on his cheek. "Light," he said to no one and then to everyone. "Keep the light away." "There is no light," Tyrion said. "Only hunger." "Same thing," the hound muttered, and then threw himself into a knot of men fighting over a sack that had once held flour but now held more blood than bread. Cersei retreated to the Red Keep with Tommen under her arm and Joffrey dragged by the wrist, and a bottle of nightshade tucked into a fold of her gown like a secret someone had told her when she was a girl. Sansa was kept with her because queens like to have something beautiful near when the world becomes ugly. It helps them remember their choices. Down in the city, Stannis' men were more disciplined than Davos had hoped and less than he had feared. A house burned because men with a quarrel had lit it, not because anyone had ordered it. The September of Baelor's bells tolled until the rope broke and the novice looked at his burned hands and smiled and cried and would not stop. The Red Keep did not fall at once, because it is made for not falling at once. Stannis stood in the yard like justice dragged from bed before breakfast. "Send them out," he told the captain on the walls. "Send out the boy and the woman and the men who hold them up, and I will be gentle. Tender as a cook," the captain returned. "We will send you our meat when we are done seasoning it." Davos thought, here at last is what melts this iron of a man. Not pity, not argument, but someone laughing in his face. Stannis' mouth went thin. "Bring the ram," he said, and it was the most merciful order he could give. It ended in a way too quick to be called a siege. A gate walked itself open somewhere it should not have. A Kettleblack took coin in a stairway no one visited and found it lighter than he had hoped and told himself he would get more later. Cersei had gathered women to Maegers and told Sansa stories that braided kindness and cruelty with a hand as practiced as any seamstress. When the shouting changed outside, it was as if a song had pitched into a key the ear does not accept. She had the vial in her hand and looked at Tommen and then at her reflection in wine and then at Sansa and thought of killing none of them, all of them, herself. She chose to wait. It was over faster than some weddings. Stannis's men climbed stairs that had not felt their feet in years and found guards with their belts loosened by heat and fear. Ser Mandon Moore tried to cut Tyrion and died instead because Podrick Payne had quick hands and because someone must. The Hound vanished. Later he would be a rumor, a blade without a master, a man who had learned once more that Rhys was the only real thing in the world. Joffrey was found in a passageway with a sword. He could not lift an eyes hard with a terror that had not yet taught itself humility. They brought him to the yard. Stannis stood in the middle of it, thin as a drawn bow. He looked at the boy and saw a treason that had nothing to do with lineage. "You ordered my brother's death," he said, and the boy's mouth worked. "Renly?" The boy breathed, as if the name itself were a trick. "Renly was killed by a man who called himself king," Stannis said. "By men who said they loved him and loved power more, which is the same. You will have a trial." Cersei spat. "You give him what you did not give Eddard Stark." "That was not my day," Stannis said. "This is." He had them taken to cells that were not deep enough to be kindness. He had Tyrion hauled to him and did not order his death, which surprised the Hand and made him hate the man a little less than he would have if Stannis had tried to be gracious. Stannis's law was a tool for scraping the skin thin so that you could see the vein. Tyrion had always admired tools. In the city, the small folk woke the next day and found bread in carts, given out under Stannis's banner by men who did not smile when they handed it to women whose hands shook too much to hold it. They found soldiers walking lanes like men who felt they owned them and could be persuaded to share, and others who took what they wanted because habit is a teacher harder to beat than any at the Citadel. Davos walked those lanes until his boots were a lesson in how much a man can endure by merely continuing. And when he came to the Dragon Gate, he watched workmen hauling down the lion banners and raising the banner of the crowned stag. It trembled and then steadied when the wind remembered its task. Outside the city, Lord Mace Tyrell came up the Roseroad at last with a great show of silvered spears and musicians and banners that looked as if they had been ironed on the march. He found Stannis's colors flying over the walls and stopped because that is what Lord Mace does when confronted with complexity. Randall Tarley marked the fires in the city with a pragmatic frown. Loras pulled his destrier's mouth bloody for a moment and then mastered himself because a knight must. Littlefinger smiled and thought of the coin now stacked in other rooms than those he had planned to fill. They sent a messenger. Stannis met him in the yard of the Red Keep that had been scrubbed. Not clean, but less befouled. The way a man scrubs a shirt that has lain too long in blood. The messenger spoke of alliance and betrayal and honor and bread in phrases tailored by other men's hands. He spoke of Marjorie and Joffrey and then of Marjorie and Tommen and then of Marjorie and anyone else who could make her queen with the wave of a court's hand. Stannis listened as if someone were reciting a prayer to a god he did not worship. When he spoke, it was to say, if Lord Mace Tyrell wishes an audience with his king, he may come into the city and take a knee. They fear the Red Woman, Tyrion said later, amused and appalled at the same time. They fear that if they bend their knee, she will take it. This is what happens when you set a man on fire. He sets other men on fire even when you ask him to shake their hands. Stannis did not ask them to shake his hand. He sat the Iron Throne, awkward as any honest man sits a liar's seat. He kept Joffrey's trial brief and exact. It mattered less than whether the city would eat. He had Cersei judged as a queen who had done harm to the realm in the guise of protecting it. He had her confined in a tower gilded with humiliation and guards who saluted her with respect and loathing. He had Tommen given a tutor with a narrow face and a love of books and a fondness for children in a way that did not require touching them. He sent Myrcella to Dorne with a parade of courtesy and the understanding that the Martells loved the sight of a Lannister humbled as much as they loved sunlight on water. He called a council. He named Davos Hand because there were no other men in the realm who would take the title without imagining their fingers had grown longer with it. He named Axel Florent to a place where he could be watched. He named Melisandre Nothing and did not tell her so. Her eyes were calm. Perhaps she had seen it. Send bread to Flea Bottom and the Fishmonger Square every day until we have none left, Stannis ordered. Tax the Reachmen when they come to market. Let the gold cloaks stand as they stood. but change their captain to one who fears poverty more than rough justice. Send ravens to Lord Hoster Tully with witness that the Lannister boy is taken, and that we will try him for killing Eddard Stark's truth. Send ravens to the Eyrie, and to the north if any ravens still know the way. Robb Stark may also call himself king, Tyrion observed. If you wish to gather real friends, you could do worse than to make him less your enemy than you must. The North remembers its dead, Stannis said. So do I. Melisandre turned to Davos when they were alone. Now you will discover what you are, she said. Man or faith? I am a hand, he said. And a father. In that order? She asked. In whatever order the day demands, he said. Mace Tyrell did not march his men into the city. He sent Lord Tarly to say that the Tyrells recognized no king who murdered their own. Stannis did not send Melisandre with an answer. He sent Davos. The Hand rode out with a small escort. He encountered Tarly beneath the sear shade of a beech in high summer. Tarly's face had been carved by pragmatism into a handsome hardness. Lord Tarly, Davos said, we have bread if your men want it, sold at a fair price. We are not beggars, Tarly said. We do not buy bread from thieves. Then bring your own loaves close, Davos said with equanimity, and keep them close. If your lord intends to sit and watch while the sea, Atuai is fed and the realm is mended, he can claim later that he was wise. Is that what you are doing? Tarly asked, curious as men are who can afford to be. I am trying to do what hurts least, Davos said. I find it hurts more than I expected. Loras will not bend, Tarly said, as if sharing a weather report. He will try to shame you into riding out so that men may sing of it later. Men sing of what pleases them and forget the rest, Davos said. We will not ride to please him or you. We will ride when there is bread. Bread, Tarly repeated. You are a smuggler. I was, Davos said. Now you are a hand, Tarly said, and his mouth twisted, not unkindly. I will tell my lord that the king offers us the privilege of buying our own food from him. He will send me back with more words. Words are coin, Davos said. We are all poor, Lord Tarly. Choose which poverty you prefer. They parted with nods that were almost respect and almost hatred. Davos watched the Reach banners go away like a garden that had decided to turn around and walk in the other direction. He looked at his escort and thought they looked like weeds by comparison. He told himself weeds feed cattle. He told himself cattle feed men. He told himself too many things. In the city, Sansa watched Tommen become a softer boy now that someone did not tell him he was a king. She watched Tyrion become an unexpected ally in small things. A cup of thin wine when she was thirsty, a joke soft enough to miss, a look that said he would not hurt her when others might. She watched Stannis' justice cross the yards in measured strides and wondered if it was a different god than the one her mother had taught her to pray to, or the same god wearing a worse face. She sang in the sept because the sept still had a roof and men stood there and pretended to be calmer when girls sang. She found the Hound once under a stair, breathing like a kicked dog. Go, he said when he saw her. Go away, little bird. I don't want to hurt you. I do not want you to hurt me, she answered, surprised by her own courage. But I do not mind if you are hurting. It makes you more like other men. He laughed then and wept, both, and she understood the world a little better and not at all. Autumn came down like a curtain. The Tyrells withdrew to the Mander. The Lannisters withdrew to the Rock. Robb Stark held the Riverlands by will and the quick feet of his men. Mace Tyrell wrote letters that said nothing and weighed much. Varys smiled more and told fewer jokes. Littlefinger notched new debts on his soul and kept them rolled close under his skin where only he could feel them itch. Stannis sat his throne and found it no more comfortable with time. Law came to him in questions with knives under them. How much bread men need before they stop killing other men for bread? How much light a city needs before shadows behave? How many truths can stand in one room before one of them goes to fetch a sword? Melisandre stood in his halls with her eyes full of distant ovens and forges and told him that the long night would want him, and he told her he had things nearer at hand. She nodded as if he had proved her point. On a cold morning, Davos came to the king with a scrap of parchment and a heaviness in him like lead. "From the north," he said, and Stannis took it and read and looked older after he had. "Ned Stark's son," Stannis said. "A king who does not want to be one." He rubbed the bridge of his nose between finger and thumb, as if he could rub the world into a shape that would sit still. "We must summon him." "He may not come," Davos said. "He will be busy feeding his own wolves." "He must hear me," Stannis said quietly. "He will not like what I say, and he will say something I do not like, and the realm will like neither. But we must hear each other." "Bread first," Davos said. He was tired of hearing himself say it, and tired of men ignoring it, and tired of men obeying it. "Bread," Stannis said, and did not smile. At dusk, standing on the city's wall with the wind loud in his ears and the river running black and patient, Davos thought of the boy he had fed with onions, and of the men they had burned on Dragonstone, and of the 3 cogs worth of grain he had sent to sleep in the deep, and thought how victory looks like a mouth that never shuts and eats whatever you offer it, law or honor or money or men. He wondered what it would ask for next. He turned and watched the crowned stag flinch and unfurl on the Red Keep's highest tower when the wind changed. For a moment it looked as if it would soar. Then it settled to its old swaying, as all banners do. He breathed and tasted the city's smoke and the far salt of the bay and a faint sweetness that might have been cherries rotting in some merchant's forgotten hold. And he smiled despite himself at the memory of Salador San's satisfied face. Below him, a woman led 2 children by the hand along a street whose stones had been washed with a diligence more honest than any prayer. One of the children held bread. He tore a piece and gave it to the other child, and the other bit him, and the woman hissed and then took the bread and divided it with fingers that had learned many lessons. The sound of their feet on the stone was very small. Davos strained to hear it, as though inside it there might be a better music yet to come. Night coiled itself on the roofs. In the painted chamber, a candle burned and a king leaned over an old table with a sea on it. In a room nearby, a girl with a scar smiled at a story in a book and touched a picture as if it were a friend. In a cell beneath, a queen counted her breaths and plotted a day without end. In a hall, a dwarf drank wine that did not taste of much and found in it the courage to continue being clever. In a sept, a girl's voice rose and fell, and the men beneath it pretended not to feel their eyes fill. In a street, a hound who was not a hound anymore looked up at the moon and thought it a cheap coin and wanted to throw it away and could not. Far along the Roseroad, where thorns massed and waited for a season to tell them who would pull them, a young knight with flowers embroidered on his surcoat stared east and swore by all his gods that he would one day ride the road in the other direction and carry a different kind of fire. In the green halls of the Manor, an old woman pricked a finger on a thorn she had herself sharpened and tasted the proof of a plan in her blood. In the west, under hard stone, a lord polished his grudges and counted men instead of coin and found the counting bitter. Ships rocked on Blackwater Bay, some with grain in their bellies, some with men, some with nothing more than a hope that if they slept at anchor, the sea would forgive them in the morning. The Searoad lay quiet, its towns with shutters closed and chimneys breathing low. The gullet squeezed the wind into shapes sailors had learned to read, and Davos was one of them. And he leaned on stone with his ruined fingers and imagined he could read the future the same way. He could not, but he knew enough. "Bread," he said to the dark, because it was a word with weight. Bread and law. It was not a prayer. He had never been good at those. It was a promise he was not sure he could keep. But he said it as men say a thing they mean to carve into the day if their hands hold up. In the Red Woman's chamber, flames whispered to themselves and showed her 1,000 years of night, and a crown that glowed like iron left too long in a forge, and a line of kings strung like beads on a string that some child had knotted too tight. She smiled at the pictures and did not say what they were to anyone else. Faith does not share well. Stannis slept a little when dawn took a breath. He dreamed of a stag standing on a narrow road, its ribs showing and its eyes still. It did not move when he approached. It did not lower its head. It looked at him as if he were the one who would need to step aside. He woke with his jaw aching from the way he clenched it in his sleep. He rose and dressed and went to the table and put his hand on the painted bay where the river opens its mouth to the sea, and the paint had worn off there in a faint kiss from all the hands that had touched that place before. He thought of the men he had starved and the men he had fed, of his brother laughing and shouting and then dying, of Renly smiling and never doubting, of a girl with a scar who liked to speak to him without fear in the way only children and fools do. He thought of Davos's hands, the fingers cut to knuckle, closing on a loaf. "Bread and law," he said to the empty air, and went about his day finding how to serve both without betraying either and failing, and then trying again. The city held. The roads held. The sea did what seas do. Somewhere beyond, winter was walking, watching where men lay down the straw of their choices and deciding how warm it would be when it came to lie down as well.